I'm going to just start off by introducing myself a little bit, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the webinar will be about, and then I just have a couple quick kind of brainstorming questions to get a feel for what your experience is. And since the chat is not working, you can just shout out, and you can say your name if you feel comfortable, or even just shout out the response as well. Let me see. So again, my name is Tennille Sabin. I work for Child Care Resources. I'm an infant toddler coach, and I work typically with the infants and toddlers, and work with the early. And so hopefully, if you're hearing this, if you can either mute your microphone if you're talking, or try to regulate the volume of whatever's going on around so that everyone can hear. Because right now everyone can hear whatever's going on with everyone's microphone, just so that we can all kind of hear each other. Okay. So just to give a really quick overview of what I'll talk about today is just a really quick overview about brain development in the early years. And I recognize that a lot of you may already have had trainings or expertise and information on that. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Also, we're going to talk a lot about what's called serve and return. So have some more skills to notice the serves or the bids for attention in the children that you work with, and also to promote more responsive care in their caregivers, which in the end also helps with emotional regulation. And then also gain some skills and strategies of how to return those serves in ways that will help their development, and learn about the serves in adults and the importance of the returns, so that you are supporting the parents or the caregivers in supporting healthy kind of self-reflection of their kind of social emotional needs themselves, and then also of the kiddos. Okay, so kind of the first slide here is what you all already know, is that development occurs in the context of relationships for young children especially. So I'm wondering if you can shout out, and since usually we would have access to the chat, but I'm not sure if it's on here or not.
Yes, we do now. We've got it.
Oh, okay. Okay, let me see. So for some reason it's not coming up. Okay, there we go. I have to move it around. Okay, so if you can try typing into the chat, and I will read them off as if you're putting in suggestions. So what are some ways that you notice, some positive ways that you notice parents building those relationships? So what kind of interactions or experiences are you able to observe, specific examples, and it can be really quick, of how parents are interacting with the kids in the play and learn group. So I don't know if I should also type that into the chat just in case as well. And I don't have an option to send to all audience, so I won't do that. And I don't know if I can see the chat once it comes in.
So one person, Tennille, has replied, actually Fran Williams, who's on, has said sharing a project at the craft table or on the floor with blocks. Someone else, Monica, suggested talking to them with facial expressions. Another participant, Jean, has said she's not exactly sure what you're asking, so maybe a little bit more clarification.
Sure. So those are great examples, the two that Monica and Fran provided. So what are some positive examples of how parents are interacting in the play and learn groups that you feel are positive ways that they're building relationships with their child? And so one example was sharing a project, so interacting with them and taking interest in what they're doing, or showing them how to do the craft, talking with the child, so whatever age, with their facial expressions. It can be very specific, and again, there's no right answer. There's lots of possibilities.
So Jessica has said that she has observed asking them about colors and shapes when playing with the Legos. And then Jean also replied that I do find that they're working and talking alongside them, and we try to discourage cell phones so that they can do that, particularly when they're at the craft table.
Okay, so being present with them in the moment and sharing in what they're interested in, what they're doing, and really actively participating. So not being distracted sounds like is you see as a very positive way. Maybe one or two more if anyone else has some things they've observed.
Yeah, Lorena actually just typed in just what you were saying, where they ask their kids what they're doing. So they're showing that interest and asking them about it. And then Monica also said they let the child choose between toys or activities, so offering some choice in the Play and Learn group.
Okay, so all of those things are examples, and you as the facilitator of the Play and Learn group, you get a really great opportunity to kind of observe parents and observe that dynamic between parents and children, and it's probably very different among each of the kind of a parent or caregiver child pairs or groups that come in. And some of the things I'm going to talk about today are you're already observing them, and parents and adults, we naturally already do a lot of them. Part of it is just kind of giving a name to it and being more conscious that it's happening so that we can also support the parents and kind of call them out in positive ways to show that they are helping their development. Okay, so just a really quick recap about early brain development. So the little orange bars at the bottom represent the kind of first couple years, and then also what their kind of synapses or your brain activity looks like as an adult. So as you can see, when they start off as a newborn, and it really gets more and more busy, so the growth is really dense up until 2 years, and then it kind of, as an adult, it seems pretty similar. So even just a little bit less as an adult. So we know that the first couple years are so important, and then a lot of the foundation for who we are today was formed in the first couple years of our life. And I know that there's a lot of stress on that in many of the trainings you already take. So both the formation and the reinforcement of connections influenced by the child's environment and the relationships with caregivers. So we really want to emphasize that relationship and those interactions with their caregiver or with their parent is building their brain and is helping to create more of those connections in the brain and building the brain in positive ways. And just something that I always remind parents, and then also any caregivers or educators or facilitators, is their favorite toy is you or is the parent. So a lot of times I have parents or educators asking, well, what is the best activity, and what is a really good sensory activity? Really, that actually a lot of times should be the lesser of like the focus, as like how are parents and children going to be able to interact, because even if you have a cardboard box, it really is not about what you have, it's about the interactions that are going on around that box, the language and the relationship, and how they're able to interact with each other. So they learn a lot of that through what we would call like back and forth interactions, which are a lot of times the foundation of us having language skills, because we take turns when we're speaking and having a conversation. And especially for young children that have less language skills, those back and forth interactions are very important. And without that, the brain just doesn't grow. Without those interactions, if they just had the cardboard box and no one was ever interacting with them, their brain would develop, but would not be the same as when there would be an actual person interacting with them. And just a little bit about the research. We know that the best developmental outcomes happen in the first 5 years of life, as long as there are sensitive timely and responsive interactions between caregivers and children. And that doesn't have to just be parents. It can be older siblings, it can be teachers, it can be foster parents, it could be relatives. So there's lots of people that can be that potential caregiver. And some children have a lot of those positive interactions, and some maybe just have one really strong caregiver in their life. And the main thing we talk about with responsive interactions are when we recognize the initiations of the children. So when the child is behaving in a certain way, when they communicate with us, when they're displaying some sort of emotion, when they make some sort of bid for our attention, and then the caregiver responds in a consistent and timely way, is really the first key. And the second is trying to anticipate and kind of prevent the child from becoming overwhelmed by meeting their needs. So when we are responding to them, when they give us subtle cues about what they need, we're preventing a lot of times those big behaviors or more challenging behaviors, and we're reinforcing kind of the positive social and self-regulation that goes with it. Okay, so I wanted to show a video really quick, so hopefully you'll all be able to see this and hear it as well. Let me see if I can. Okay, I'm going to put it on pause for just 1 second so I can make it bigger. Full screen, maybe it doesn't get any bigger than that. Not sure. Okay, we might not be able to see it bigger, but we'll see.
We're now learning about the many ways in which solid brain foundations are built and maintained in a developing child. One important way is through what brain experts call serve and return interaction. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across the net, various forms of communication pass between the two, from eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo.
The child serves or indicates they're interested in something. The adult who's attentive to that child returns that interest.
Uh-oh. What happened? Sorry about that.
We're now learning through what brain experts call
I clicked my screen and it didn't like that.
The contact, the touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo.
The child serves or indicates they're interested in something. The adult who's attentive to that child returns that interest, and that ramps up the child's enthusiasm, and they do the activity again. So when they're learning to read, the child shows an interest in a book. The adult sees that and reads to them. The child gets all excited and tries reading back, and then the child's using those circuits that underlie reading over and over again, driven by the enthusiasm of the interaction with the attentive adult.
The response and attention a child receives from an adult when they are practicing certain social, emotional, and physical skills goes a long way to sparking that child's own excitement with learning and repeating certain actions.
The child gets positive feedback from the adult, and they try harder, so they're using that circuit again and again. That circuit will really be sturdy, will form a sturdy architecture for later life function.
In order to build these sturdy circuits in a developing brain, it's crucial for caregivers to actively engage with the child. Prolonged passive activities, such as leaving the child alone in front of a television, or merely holding the child without eye contact, will not build solid brain architecture.
Without serve and return attentive adult interactions, the child's much less likely to undertake a lot of these activities, and their brain won't develop as well.
Serve and return interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development.
Okay. We're going to move on. So just to kind of review from the video. A serve is when a child initiates an interaction. So there can be lots of ways that they serve to adults, and which you probably have heard that as bids for attention or initiating. Either nonverbal cues like making eye contact, smiling, something, changing their body positioning, holding hands. Sometimes it could be pointing, gestures, sounds, or words. So basically, at the bottom, it says when they do something, say something, or look at something is what a serve is. Ooh. There we go. And then the ways that we return a serve, there are actually a couple different ways. Basically, first you have to notice the child. So one is sharing the child's focus, and I'll go a little bit more into depth in some of these in a minute. Sharing the child's focus. So first we have to actually notice the child. So if you saw the video, a couple of times the child was trying to initiate with the dad or with the mom, but they were on their phone, and so they weren't noticing that. So that's actually the first step. First, they have to actually notice what the child is doing or what they're interested in. Then supporting and encouraging, naming, back and forth interactions, and then endings and beginnings. And I'll just go really briefly into what each one of these are, and we can watch a couple of really quick clips to just kind of show them. So just something to remember, there's lots of interactions that happen, but if we call it serve and return, which is those are the interactions that we found have the biggest impact on brain development, it's when the serve and return begins with the child, when the interactions start with them. So it's not if the parent goes and says, now we're going to put on your coat, or do you want to come and jump outside or play this with me. It's when the child initiates. And sometimes the parent can start an activity and then wait and observe for the child to initiate after that. But really, for it to be called serve and return, it has to start with the child. The very first one is, again, sharing the child's focus, and that's when the caregiver, the adult, is noticing what the child is interested in, and then they put their focus there too. So if a child is pointing at a bird, or if a baby is just looking at a toy, first the adult has to realize what they're looking at or what they're interested in. And sometimes it could be you're looking at a book and they look at a certain picture, and that is their initiation, that is their serve. So I'm going to really quick switch out of here and go look at it. We'll go look at a video in a different screen. Let me see here. Oh, here we go. See if I can find the one here. Well, these are videos, case forms. Nope. Well, all files. There we go. Thank you for waiting. Okay, and these are really quick. So we will just watch them very briefly. So this is Cherry and the Focus. Oop. Hang on one second. They give a little introduction. If I can switch back to it correctly. Okay. So in this clip, the child serves by playing in the kitchen area, and the teacher notices and shares the focus by looking towards her and talking about what she is doing. So this is happening in an early learning setting, but if you can imagine either yourself or, of course, the caregiver in the role of the teacher. So that's it. That was very short, wasn't it? There's just such a quick, simple interaction. And of course, they're only showing a portion of it. But I'm just going to walk you through it really quick. So the child, her serve is she's playing in the kitchen. She's not necessarily asking for attention or saying, teacher, teacher, look at me, or mom, look at me. She's just playing and doing her thing. And so it's the caregiver that comes over and returns that serve by saying something. The first thing she does is actually look and get a little bit closer to the child and says, oh, what are you making? So she sees what she's doing and she makes a comment about it. And we don't know what the child's response is, at least in this situation, but that's just kind of a start to, since it's the very first element, what can go from there. And I will show one more video on that because they're so brief. Okay, sharing the focus again. So in this clip, the caregiver is sitting at the table with two children, and the children serve by playing with the clock, and the caregiver looks over at the clock with them, and that is sharing the focus. Okay, so that seems probably pretty simple, and there's things that you already naturally do that parents already naturally do. And what I'll talk a little bit more about in this training are some other ways to respond and really just taking the focus again off of the parents trying to entertain or the parents trying to be constantly talking and taking the focus back onto the child and what they're interested in and slowing things down a little bit, doing some more waiting and trying to make sure that we are following their lead and following their initiations and not our own. Do you have any questions so far about serve and return and the first element, which is sharing the child's focus? Oops.
Yeah, and just so that folks know, I know that it's a little bit choppy trying to see the videos, and I've gotten a few comments that there's some delay and it's kind of hard to hear. So I think we should be able to send out the links so that you can watch these after the webinar, but just trying to get some ideas of examples of serve and return. And if you all have examples or questions that you want to throw out there, go ahead and type them in the chat box. But Tennille, we can send the link so that they can watch the videos in their own time, correct?
Yes, yeah. And I won't show, knowing that, I won't show too many of them just because I don't want to, especially if you're not able to see what's going on, it's not as useful, I guess, because they are so short. So it's kind of hard to watch and kind of have it be effective if you're not able to hear and see what's going on. Okay. Any other questions about or comments about sharing the child's focus or serve and return in general? Okay, so the next element is supporting and encouraging, and that's kind of split into two different ones. So supporting is when you're helping or teaching the child, and then encouraging is when you're motivating or doing some sort of praising to kind of have them continue what they're doing. So maybe you all can give me an example of times when you see parents helping or teaching their child. And some of them we've already talked about, but maybe just thinking of any other examples about when you see a child initiate and then a teacher or one of you facilitators or an adult return their serve with support.
So So someone, let's see, Jean wrote in, I do think we support parents a lot, that we should be doing more interacting because they all get so tired and they come to us because they are tired, particularly when a child is too young yet to talk. They sometimes seem to give up.
Okay. So how do you see parents, and that's a very good point, because a lot of times parents come to these groups and they may not necessarily know or feel like they have the energy to interact and to support their child. And so what I understand Jean saying is that perhaps the facilitator is there to kind of help support and take a little bit more lead in interacting with the parents and the children.
Are there others who've noticed that in their groups as well, that parents sometimes see it as they can get some assistance with all of these exhausting interactions? Jean wrote back, my retort is to offer a lot of talking, and with younger shy ones to simply offer them toys.
Okay. And is that, sorry, with Jean, is that that your suggestion to parents, or is that what the parents, their response is?
Jean replies, I try to suggest that the parents do what I do. So I think she's talking about doing some modeling.
Okay. Okay. And I would say that that is a really great suggestion, is to be talking a lot with their kids. And I would, the purpose of this this presentation is to also turn that a little bit on. We don't want to just be talking to the kids without there being, we want to start first in what they're looking at and what they're interested in. So for example, if you're looking at a book and you just want to read the book to them and you see the picture of the lion, and you're like, look at that lion, it has a really big mane, but the child's not looking at the lion, they're looking at the other page that has a zebra on it. It's going to be much more effective if you first start with whatever they're looking at or they're interested in, and then you can come back to the lion later. And so that's kind of the difference with serve and return, is we're trying to increase the amount of interactions and talking, but we also want to focus on the interest of the child. And the nice thing about this also, it gives us a little bit more material to work with babies, because sometimes we have parents or caregivers that don't always see babies as interacting with them. And babies interact and give lots of cues and let us know that they're interested in things. It's just we have to be much better kind of investigators to see what it is that they're looking at. So a lot of that has to do with where their eye is, what they're looking at, if they're not able to point. Sometimes babies will get really excited and they'll start kicking. Sometimes they might reach for something or, you know, knock something over on accident. So, and of course babies cry, and babies express a lot of emotion through crying, and that's a lot of their communication as well. And so being very purposeful about waiting and really reading those cues and being good observers, one as ourselves as educators, and then also helping the parents realize when that is happening. So if you notice a baby or a child looking at something and maybe the parent's missing that, trying to help point that out in of course, a respectful, subtle way. Oh, look I see her looking at the bear on that page. Those kind of things. So, and I don't know if there was any other comment.
Jean was agreeing, and then Monica also tied it back to using this similarly as an emergent curriculum, and how, you know, she typed that in, and we do talk about that a little bit with Kaleidoscope Play and Learn, especially, you know, beyond just babies, of the emergent curriculum and really following the lead of the kids that are in the group to see what they're excited about. And Monica wrote that we base the lesson of the day on the interests of the children and the families that are there, and that's really how they figure out what they're going to do on any given day in a group.
Great. Yeah, and that's kind of in thinking of like on a larger scale. So you're coordinating the activities during the day on what the children's interests are, and serve and return is kind of, if we think about like the whole play and learn and the interactions that happen as kind of the whole world, the serve and return is, or like the whole movie, if we're thinking about movies. So the play and learn is like a whole movie. And we think about serve and return, it's just like a 5-second snippet out of that movie that happens. So we want to go from thinking about big and the whole interactions and the activities that are going on and really zooming in and slowing down and focusing on those really, really brief, what we call micro interactions between the parents and the child. And that's why a lot of the videos that I'm going to show a couple more, but I won't show too many more. They are really brief. They happen in like 10 seconds because it's really waiting for the children to do something before we respond. So just to kind of recap, supporting and encouraging, again, when we think about how we support and encourage children, or how caregivers can support and encourage the children that are in their care, so parents or grandparents, foster parents, one, they can provide them with some support. So that means if a child needs a drink of water, or they can't fit that last block on there, or teaching them. So sometimes we might give them a word for something. Sometimes we might help them when they're upset. So we might say, oh, you feel really sad. So it's responding to whatever's going on with them, or whatever they actually need in that moment. The other part of that is encouraging. So if they're doing something, we don't want to just say, oh, good job, you're awesome. We want to give a little bit more specific feedback and go a little bit farther. So you can definitely just say, oh, good job, or awesome, or sometimes it could just be you're smiling or laughing. So you're doing something so that they know that this is a great thing that they're doing, and we want to kind of have them continue on. But we can do it really subtly also with some verbal praise. So you're, just talking about what they're doing. You're moving the train, or I like how you are listening right now. So sometimes it's giving them a compliment, sometimes it's giving them some praise, sometimes it's just smiling, sometimes it's just raising our eyes and showing them that we're excited about what they're doing too. So supporting and encouraging is another part of that, and I'm going to see if I can show the other video really quick. And I'm sorry that if it's choppy. Hopefully you'll all be able to access some of them later. We'll go with this one. And it could be the Wi-Fi if it's not really fast, depending on your speed, and of course my speed here too. So supporting and encouraging. So there's this teacher again, and she's got the two boys that were playing with the clock, but I'm not sure if that's the same one we're going to see. Sometimes the title page is different. In this clip, a child serves by flying his blocks around like a spaceship. The caregiver, the parent, returns the serve by asking what he's building, and that is encouragement. So that went really fast. So we're going to go through it one more time, and then I'm going to stop it. So I'm actually stopping the video so that I can kind of talk. So here they are at this little block table. There's a couple kiddos. And this young man, this little boy, his serve is he's flying the block around. And you notice the first thing is the teacher, or you could say parent, returns the serve by first sharing his focus and noticing what he's doing. And then she says, well, tell me about what you're building. And he says back, a spaceship. So she didn't automatically say, oh, you're flying that around, or she tried to just ask questions and tried to follow what his lead was, instead of trying to maybe say, oh, come back over here and let's build something. Or that's sometimes what I see often is when we see a child doing, any sort of activity, maybe it's not how we foresee them playing or interacting with something. But instead of redirecting it as a behavior and saying, oh, let's come over here, build this, or let's look at these blocks, we're focusing on what he's already doing. And he stopped for a second and he responded that he was making a spaceship. We'll watch it one more time through. Okay, so we're not going to watch that second time. Well, actually, that one's not too bad because it actually shows emotion, which is a good one. So we'll watch with this one too. So this is an example of supporting. So in this clip, a child serves by crying and looking up at you, and then you or the parent return his serve by sitting down near him, inviting him to sit on your lap, and talking in a soothing voice. So this is providing support. So we're going to watch that one more time through, and then I'll kind of do the pauses a little bit in between. So first, the child serves by crying. There seemed to be a disagreement between him and another child, I believe, that got to the chair first. And so he sat down on the floor and was crying. And so that's his serve. And the teacher responds by, one, sharing his focus, so she got down on his level. She didn't talk a lot to begin with. She just got down on his level and she held out her hands to see if he was interested in coming in and sitting with her. And so she responds back to him, and so after providing some support and being very gentle and kind of a calm tone, she says, oh, you were trying to get to the chair, and he says yes. And so as you see, it kind of goes back and forth. Instead of sometimes the adult talking too much, it's slowing it down just a little bit so that we can listen to the child's needs and have them also participate in the interaction. Okay, I'm not going to watch that one again for now. Okay, I don't know why it goes all the way back. Okay, so that's supporting and encouraging. And again, it always starts when we talk about serve and return, it starts with the child. And so as you saw, we saw a couple examples of support and encouragement, and we also talked a little bit about that. Something that I think we see a lot is the next element, which is naming. So we're just describing what a child is feeling, doing, looking at, anything that they're interested in. So naming, earlier one of the facilitators had said that it was talking with the child about what colors they were seeing, or naming what a child is doing. And so those are two really good examples. Sometimes we see naming emotions, so, oh, you're really sad, or naming what they're participating in. So we saw that teacher that said, oh, you're flying your, she could say, you're flying your block around, or I wonder what you're doing. Sometimes with babies or with kiddos that don't talk very much, it's just talking about what they're looking at. So if they're looking at or at a picture in a book, or if they're looking out the window, we could just describe to them what they're seeing. And really as with any of these, it's just kind of waiting and watching sometimes to see where they go with something. So if we provide an activity, sometimes, again, it's focusing on the experience and letting them explore it instead of having us, dive in and show them how to do it and taking the lead. We really want them to kind of take the lead and have a little bit more independence in that respect. Any questions about naming? It's pretty straightforward with this one. Okay. So the next one is back and forth. And this one, we saw a little bit of this in some of the videos as well. It's really waiting for the child to respond and just taking turns. So the child might serve by crying, and the teacher comes over or the parent comes over and sits down next to them and says, oh, what happened? And then the child says, I hurt my arm. And then the parent might say, oh, I'm so sorry, do you need a hug? So it's really just going back and forth and letting, again, the child lead the interaction. If you're talking about when you're playing or if they're engaging in an activity, it's the same thing. It's we watch what the child is doing first before we respond. So they might not be saying anything, but they might be digging in the dirt or they might be coloring. So really we want to try and respond to what, according to what they're doing, instead of trying to draw their attention. That's what I see sometimes adults doing, is drawing their attention to something else that the adult think is might be more interesting to them, or that the parent might think would be more fun, and so sometimes that learning is lost because their kind of attention is taken away from something they're really interested in to something maybe the adult is interested in. And as many times as you can go back and forth, the better. And this is also possible with babies. Babies, they have that kind of natural instinct to interact with you. So if you've ever seen, babies make noises and then the parent is repeating the noise, and maybe they could go back and forth a couple times that way. Or if a baby is looking at a toy and the parent says, oh, you really like that toy, and maybe moves it a little bit closer, and maybe the baby goes back and tries to reach for it, and the parent says, oh, you're trying to reach for it, you're trying to get it. So it goes back and forth that way, instead of the parent grabbing the toy or activating it and moving it in front of the child's face. It's really, again, just waiting just a little bit more for the child to engage or to respond in some way. I don't know if there's any questions or comments so far.
No one's typing anything in.
Okay. I'm going to just watch a really quick video for back and forth. Just so that we can, let me see. Oh, we're kind of running short on time, so I might, let me see. I might just skip that one, and then maybe we'll include, if I can include the link later. But again, it's all the other elements. It's just continuing going back and forth like a conversation, but you don't necessarily need to be talking. Let me restart the slide. Maybe not. Okay, well, we'll just go back this way. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. It's kind of new technology for me, some of this. Okay, and then the final one is endings and beginnings. And this one is sometimes a little bit tricky because we don't always, you have to, again, really develop your observer skills to find out when a child is done with an activity. So endings, beginning, sometimes you might know it as transitions. It's when a child shows you that she is done with one thing and is ready to move on to something else. So it's not when we say, okay, you have to stop and it's time to go wash your hands. It's actually when the child initiates that ending. So that could be that they're playing with the blocks and they get up and they move over to the craft table. or that could be that they are talking to you and then they change the subject. So it's really the adult realizing when those changes occur and following their lead. Or when, let's say, a baby is looking at a book or one toy and then they look away and they're kind of like, I'm done with that, or I need a break. So it's really noticing those very subtle cues sometimes that they're done with one thing and they were ready to move on to something else. So when they're done, what we want to do is not continue to try to keep them engaged in it. So if they're done and they're ready to move on, and it's okay, time to do that, let them move on and start something new instead of trying to keep them engaged in the same activity or the same toy when they've already kind of gotten over it. And then on the other end of that, when they start up with a new activity and they provide a new serve. So if they stop with the blocks and they go start playing at the craft table and they pick up, you know, a paintbrush or they pick up a crayon, it's like, oh, what are you going to draw? So we're also responding to them starting anew, and we're helping them kind of make that shift. Something that we know about a serve and return again is when children are able to have, you know, when we are following their interests more and we're following their lead more, the learning is more fun for them, and of course the impact and the quality of learning is much deeper. So they'll be more excited about something, they're going to learn it more. And that's just something very natural, but again, we have to really be noticing what they're interested in. And sometimes they're very small little seconds that we might miss. Okay, so maybe if each of you can think about an example of a serve from a child, and you can think of your own example of how you responded or how you saw a parent respond in returning the serve. So did they share their focus? Did they provide a name? Did they support the child? Think about, and you can use the names that I've done, or you can just provide the example. It's okay. So think of an example of a serve from a child and then how the adult, either yourself or another adult, was able to return the serve. What did they do to respond?
And if folks are willing to share some of these examples, if you want to go ahead and type them in, that would be great.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, we've got one from Jean. It says, today a shy little 2-year-old seemed scared when I showed her a puppet. I took my arm out immediately, showed her my hand quacking, and put it back in the duck puppet and quacked. She put her hand on the puppet and smiled. I later got a comment from this parent that this little girl has not trusted other adults before.
Okay. So you provided kind of a quick summary of the interaction that happened, and if we start with the child, you had the puppet and you were going to play with her, but her initiation or her serve was she showed you that she was kind of nervous or afraid or upset about the puppet. So her serve was somehow you read in her facial expression that she felt afraid or nervous about it, and so you returned her serve by giving her some support and showing her, this is just my hand, it's nothing to be afraid of. So you recognized that she felt uneasy about it and you returned her serve by pulling out your hand. So imagine if you had not realized that and you had just continued you know, using the puppet and playing with it with her, she probably would get more upset. So it's that is a wonderful example to show just how important it is to read those cues and to stop and to respond instead of continuing to see, oh, well, let's see if she can tolerate it if I do it for a little while longer. It's really responding in the moment, and that's what we call like a timely response, because you're responding right then, and you got great feedback later that, you know, that helped her kind of have more trust with you. Is there any other examples? You don't have to take too many.
No, no one else has written in anything.
And then,
sorry, we just found one from, I just saw one from Lorena, that the example that she has come up against is when a child does not want to share a toy. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that, Lorena. And Lorena, actually, I just unmuted you, so if it's easier for you to just give us your example with your voice, that would be fine too.
I don't know if I understand him and I say, okay, I know that you don't want to share at this moment.
Yeah, I would say that that's again another really great example. So the child serves by maybe he takes the toy, or maybe he or she, you know, holds it closer to him, and you're responding, you're returning the serve by again naming what's going on with him. Say, oh, you don't seem like you really want to share right now. So again, you are starting with the child and letting them kind of lead the interaction instead of, sometimes we see an adult come in and just say, oh, you have to share, and taking the toy away.
Yeah, because there are some parents told them, you need to share, remember, you need to share. And I try to explain, he's not ready right now. And I explain, okay, when you are ready, the other child is waiting for that toy. When they are ready, they leave the toy.
And that could be another really good example when he does decide to share, when he does give the toy up, or when he does leave the toy on the ground, say, oh, okay, you're all done. Thank you for letting your friend use the toy. So again, it's really kind of narrowing in on those little small interactions and helping them see that they also have some control over the situation, and that their perspective is also really important. Okay. Oopsie. There's another video, but I think what I'll do is I'll send this one, because again, it's a really good one to watch, but I don't want you to have to watch it if it's not coming through.
Yeah, I think the videos are problematic, but I do see one more comment from Monica as far as a nice example. That she said, a child was building a tower and I asked, oh, what are you building? The child smiled but didn't say, and I said, wow, it's so tall.
Okay. Oh, awesome. So what I heard there is when the child served by, they were building a tower, you returned their serve by one, sharing their focus. You watched and saw what they were doing. You said, I think you said you're building a tower, or you asked them what you're building. So you returned their serve, and then the child responded back and smiled. So they didn't say anything, but they smiled, and then you returned their serve again. So that would be a good example of back and forth. You're kind of having a conversation, and trying to kind of keep that going is really beneficial for the kids. So it's kind of waiting for them to respond, instead of, sometimes we see the child doing something and then we have them serve, and then we have sometimes the adult return, 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 instead of making it like a conversation and taking turns. So I would say that sometimes is the feedback that I provide, is make sure that the child serves and the adult responds, and then we wait again. That waiting is really hard for them to respond in whatever way. And they could continue to build. They could look up and talk to you. They could just smile. So sometimes it's really just slowing down and waiting a couple seconds to see how they respond to our response, to what we say to them. So this is just some information about when serve and return is implemented with young children, they've found that they actually improve their self-regulation skills. So if you can imagine if the parents are implementing serve and return even more, because a lot of times they're things we automatically do, but sometimes the amount of serve and return that happens at home because of TV, because of busy parents, because of tired parents, it is not always the quality and the quantity that we would like. So if they can boost that up even just a little bit, it's really going to have really positive benefits for their self-regulation, their social emotional skills, and the relationship, of course, with that adult is going to improve, because every time that you respond to a child and you follow their lead and you return their serve, you make them feel really important, that they are important to you and you see them. And so trying to help the parent do that is a really, really good skill to have. Maybe what we could do, because what time is it right now? Okay, we're kind of running out of time. I'm wondering if you want to provide some examples or some suggestions about if you see a really positive interaction between a child and a parent, what do you say or what do you do to kind of let the parent know that you saw that and that was a really great interaction that happened. So I'm wondering what kind of things have worked for you so far. And you can type it in, or you can maybe, if you would like to speak, we can open up the audio if you put.
Okay, opening up the audio if that's easier. And then also on the flip side of that question, Jean had typed in, what do you impart to a parent who does often return with a child? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go back to mute, and I think unless we have
something fun. So two parts of the question. One, what are some feedback that you were able to provide, or how do you phrase that to parents so that you're providing them, again, some positive encouragement. And then also when you have parents that are maybe not as skilled at following the child's lead and returning those serves or making it back and forth, how do you work with them, or how do you support them? And that could definitely be something that if you want some suggestions, I can talk about that really briefly as well. Okay, so just a couple of really quick examples of ways, because we want to, and again, I'm slightly familiar with Play and Learn because I help facilitate it, but I'm not aware of all the nuances and everything that has to do with it. But I know working in Early Head Start and working with the caregivers that I do, I want to always try to make the primary caregiver kind of the focus and help them. While I'm going to be modeling and talking about what I'm doing, I also want to help them and recognize when they're doing those interactions. So even in the parent that responds kind of repeatedly, I want to find those moments when they are doing that. So just like with kids, when we want to find that one time when they're doing what they should be doing at the time, we want to be responding to them in positive ways. It's the same with adults. So whatever way is more authentic for you or more natural for you to kind of give praise to the parents, you could just make an observation. Oh, I saw the way that he responded and he looked at you when you gave him a hug. Or, you don't have to go specifically into serve and return and name it that way, but just sometimes focusing on the child's response to however the parent engaged with them. So he seems to really like it when you make eye contact with him, or he loves it when you are smiling and giggling. Look at how much fun that he's having with you right now. So sometimes it could be something just really general like that. Other times it could be, you know, really narrowing in on that interaction and pointing out. He said your baby, you know, cried, or your baby cooed to you and you cooed back, and then he did this. You're really, you know, keeping that conversation going. Or other times, you know, you could also ask a question like, oh, I wonder what he wants. So that's what I find myself doing a lot is, what do you think he wants, or what do you think he needs? Because there are parents that also, on the other hand of the spectrum, they're not returning there too much, they're returning too little. So child is bidding for their attention and doing things, and it's a kind of passing over their head. They're not hearing or seeing what the child is doing because they might be preoccupied, or maybe that they don't realize that what they're doing is significant. So really helping those adults see, oh, look at it, she just kicked her feet, or she's looking over there at the book. I wonder if she wants to go over there. So those kind of things, try to give like subtle guidance to the parents, and it would help if, you know, you have some sort of way to impart the benefits, of course, on, you know, responsive caregiving as well. Let me see. So one thing that is kind of a benefit to children getting lots of serve and return interactions is that it helps the kind of the upper part of their brain that later we know will help them with rational thought and planning and problem solving and emotional regulation. It helps develop that part of their brain, whereas of course children and young and babies, typically the first couple of years it seems like more of their actions or their reasoning comes from the lower part of their brain, which is their emotions and, you know, survival, and so that's why they are so emotional sometimes, and they're not able to just say, oh my gosh, I feel so frustrated. So something that I try to help parents and caregivers think about is we want to help them develop that Einstein part of their brain, so the top part of their brain with reasoning, understanding, empathy, problem solving, and we want to, as much as possible, get away from or help them move on from just using, you know, reactive emotions, reflexes, and acting on their impulses. So I think of Fred Flintstone as kind of that lower brain, because he's kind of volatile guy, he gets really upset, and we see adults like that as well. So I try to help, we want to help the parents kind of use that top part too, but also to help them model and help their child use that top part of their brain. And again, this is just a really quickly, when we're not responsive to kids, that's actually can be very stressful to them. And if you can imagine a child that is constantly trying to kind of bid for their parents' attention, sometimes what will happen is either one, they'll just give up, just stop bidding for attention, and then on the other end, their behavior might get more and more kind of explicit. So more active, more running around, more naughty behavior is sometimes what we might see as well. So the more that the parent is doing these serve and return interactions successfully, and you as facilitators as well, the more the child will be seen, and the more they won't have that need to either kind of withdraw or again to act up, because they're getting their emotional needs met. And there's one more video, and you may have already seen this in some of your trainings, but I'll include the link as well. It's what happens when a baby is trying to, you know, serve to an adult and the adult is unresponsive, and how much stress the child actually experiences is pretty significant. Okay, I think that's the last slide. And I'm not going to, we're not going to do that one because that's with the last one. But are there any questions or comments or anything that is still on your mind or you have questions about.
We did get in a couple of nice examples that folks have witnessed. The first one is, the first thing that I tell a parent is that our program is child-directed play, and to encourage them to, 1, notice, and 2, voice what the child is doing, and then 3, aid them doing it and talk about it, which is a nice way to do that back and forth. And then Monica said, I tell them it's great that you praised her when she tried to do something herself, that will raise her self-esteem. So really explaining why, you know, the praise, what that's going to do for the child. And then also, Jean says, I laugh with parents a lot when we talk about a toy with a child and the child is done and walks away. I say squirrel and we laugh about it and make the parent know that it's okay that the child has already changed gears and her focus has shifted.
Well, that's nice. Yeah, that's a great strategy. Yeah. So yeah, I would say again with this, it's not the end all be all. It's again just another tool in your toolkit about how to support parents and really helping you be really great investigators and observers about what children are doing and helping those parents observe those moments, because a lot of times that's, you know, this day and age our attention spans are so short, so sometimes we miss a lot of those really subtle things that kids do, or you know, and maybe the parent doesn't realize the child is not having fun or the child doesn't need their help. So those are things too that we could point out, like, oh, he's doing a really great job. I wonder if he could do it without our help, or he seems a little bit uncomfortable because of, you know, this that's going on with him. I wonder if he wants to go do something else. So it's just kind of trying to help the parents also read their child's cues and understand, especially emotionally, sometimes that is the hardest part for a lot of us. It's not always something that we have a lot of training or a lot of experience with. So helping them, you know, follow the lead of their child in a big way, like, oh, let's go over to the block table, and then also in those smaller interactions that are pretty significant, more so than them choosing which activity. It's what they actually do and how they interact with each other once they get there, and how that parent is supporting. And sometimes I would say to try to go a little bit deeper than the color and the shape of things. You can always talk about the texture. You can talk about what the child is doing with it. So other language, also connecting with home, what the child would do or where they would see that item at home or in the community. So I always try to say go a little bit deeper than colors and shapes and numbers, especially for this age group. So that's all I have as far as my presentation. I don't know if there's any other final questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you everyone for participating, and if you do have other questions, you can go ahead and send those off to us, and we can, you know, come up with some answers and information for you. And we will also get the links to you so that you can watch some of those practice videos if you like and have some more examples. The PowerPoint was uploaded as a PDF in the GoToWebinar website, so if you wanted a copy of the PowerPoint, that should be available to you as well as you know, listed under the handouts. But if you do have any other questions or feedback, please let us know. And we know you all see lots of this and are, you know, really good at these kind of interactions. And thank you for taking part and for your interest in continued education. It's why you're all so good at what you do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening and having such great examples and participation too. That was wonderful.